I will never forget that day. I had seen Jet Li's Shaolin Temple maybe a year before, and I was on a Jet Li kick. I really wanted to see all his videos. This documentary came with a collection that I bought. Now, Dragons of the Orient was released in 1988, but it mostly used stock footage filmed around the time of Shaolin Temple. So it was early 80s footage. And it is a good documentary. I highly recommend it. But when they got to the Shaolin Temple, I will never forget my reaction. Check out the footage. So that was the first guy the documentary featured. And I was doing wushu at the time, so I could just tell he's doing a regular form. And what was really sad was a lot of my classmates in my wushu school did better forms than he did. And then I was like, okay, it's just one guy, And then it just gets worse. Keep watching. Imagine my surprise. Both those two forms we're looking at aren't even Shaolin forms. I get it. It was the 80s, right? People in China weren't really familiar with Kung Fu anymore. Just culturally, China was in a different place, right? It had just experienced the Cultural Revolution for like 10 years. Not like currently people are more martial arts literate. People might have not known in the 80s. Yeah, these are just standard wushu forms. They're not indicative of anything Shaolin. But for a guy like me that was doing wushu at the time, I'm like, how is this any different than any wushu form, any Kung Fu regular form you learn in any school? Now that clip almost gave me a heart attack because if you noticed, he went like this. For any one of you that's done straight sword, I have my old straight sword here since I'm still stuck with my parents. See? This is but you could tell he was using a broadsword. Broadsword, you do this. But somehow, doing broadsword, he went like this. So I could only imagine he must have been a straight sword guy that they're like, do some broadsword, man. Do some broadsword. It's more southern. Do some broadsword. So he's a straight sword guy trying to do broadsword, and he had a little brain melt where he actually did a straight sword hand pose. That guy I liked. Aesthetically, he was pretty good. Now, I will say, the average classmate of mine and even my Kung Fu school looked like him. So there was nothing impressive about that. Granted, you could say that maybe the average quality of wushu, even back in the 80s in China, wasn't very good. But come on, man. This was a documentary that was meant to be screened. They couldn't have picked the worst, right? So for those of you who don't know, that's called a 3-section staff. They're not nunchucks, 3-section staff. It's funny how the human memory is just not always correct. I distinctly remember this being a much older dude, but actually he's a kid. That's why I'm not going to be harsh on him. When I saw this as a little kid, I distinctly remember him being older. And I remember in my mind, I'm like, dude, this older dude is so bad. But upon rewatching, this is actually a little kid. So I'm not going to be too harsh on him. He's just learning. But again, was this the average level of Kung Fu at the Shaolin Temple at the time? This guy, in my opinion, was the most impressive. But again, it was just a very standard wushu form. One of my classmates was Sarah Chang, who some of you have probably seen in some movies. Sarah Chang's spear form was so good, man. Sarah Chang's spear form was as good as this guy's. From the grand scheme of things, none of this was impressive, even from a wushu, taolu, a form's perspective. I wasn't familiar with the history of the Shaolin Temple until maybe a year after I saw this clip. For those of you who don't know, by the time Jet Li and his film crew went to film in the Shaolin Temple, the Shaolin Temple had already been destroyed a few times. There was no Kung Fu at the temple. In fact, there were only 2 or 3 monks. Jet Li's movie, being such a hit worldwide, established this Kung Fu interest again. And a lot of masters, a lot of people, whether they were Shaolin Kung Fu or other forms of Chinese Kung Fu, started setting up shop either around Shaolin Temple or in Shaolin Temple. What you can see from this documentary, and I'm so surprised that they accidentally, or maybe purposely, revealed it, was that these were some of the initial Kung Fu people. Doesn't look impressive to me. Does it look impressive to you? I remember watching it with my family, and I remember my whole family was like, oh man, isn't this making the Shaolin Temple look bad? I would show this to some of my other martial arts friends, and it was the same exact reaction. I was hoping one of them would tell me I'm wrong, right? No, Jerry, you're seeing it wrong. No, it looks good. Every martial artist I showed this to was like, what is this? They all look bad. For those of you who don't know, Shaolin Kung Fu did survive despite the destruction of the Shaolin Temple a few times in history. It's got descended styles that take from it, and especially among a lot of the Chinese community abroad, let's say in Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, even in America, Shaolin Kung Fu has a lot of branches and a lot of lineages. This clip shows that you have to be a little bit skeptical, even nowadays, of what the Kung Fu in the Shaolin Temple is. Is it authentic Shaolin brought back after the movie Shaolin Temple? Or is it just some sorts of Sanda and Wushu, so non-authentic Shaolin Kung Fu? I don't know the answer, and I don't want to imply any of the answers, but what we can see in this clip that I showed you is that it looks like it's mostly Wushu people at the time, and not even the best Wushu people. So anyways, guys, keep training. And let me know what you think, man. Was there a clip that shook your foundations about any martial art like this one did to me? Let me know, guys.